Right now, as you listen to this, your ceiling is pointing at a specific star. Not metaphorically, not approximately. There is an invisible line that runs from the center of the Earth, up through the floor beneath you, up through the roof above you, out through the atmosphere and into the dark. And that line lands on a single point in the sky. Tonight, that point is a star 433 light-years away. A triple star system, 3 suns bound together, so precisely aligned with our planet's axis that sailors trusted it to cross whole oceans for centuries. The light touching that alignment tonight is old. It left that star more than 4 centuries ago, before anyone alive had built a telescope to look back at it, and it has been traveling toward your particular ceiling ever since. But here is what most people have never been told. That alignment is an accident. A temporary one. Roughly 10,000 years from now, somewhere around the year 12,000 in our calendars, the line above your head will point somewhere else entirely, to a bright blue star called Vega, about 25 light-years away, in a completely different quarter of the sky. And this is not the first time the North has moved. Nearly 5,000 years ago, the people who raised the first Great Pyramids did not steer by our North Star at all. For them, the top of the sky belonged to a fainter star called Thuban. The pole has been drifting the whole time, slowly, the way a spinning top leans and circles before it falls, tracing one enormous wobble every 26,000 years. So the North above you is real, and it is also on loan. And the deeper you follow that line, up through the ceiling, through the stratosphere, out past the last of the planets, out past the edge of the galaxy itself, the stranger the word above becomes. It stops being a direction. It softens into a question that no one has fully answered. Consider where you already are. Without ever having moved, you are not resting at the bottom of the galaxy, and you are not resting at its center. Our sun, and the Earth turning around it, and you lying still in your room, all sit about 55 light-years above the flat central plane of the Milky Way. Above it, we are already, at this very moment, in what astronomers quietly call the galactic northern hemisphere, floating a little over the midline of our own galaxy, and not a single one of us has ever felt the lift. And we are moving. The sun carries us in a great slow circle around the center of the galaxy, a center that sits roughly 26,000 light-years away from us, out past a wall of stars and dust, whose far side you will never see. We travel that circle at about 30 kilometers every second. It does not feel like anything, and still, one single loop, one full lap around the galactic center, takes somewhere between 225 and 250 million years. Every empire you have ever read about, every ancestor whose name was ever spoken, every war and every quiet harvest, all of it fits inside the thinnest sliver of one turn. We have not completed a single lap since long before there were human eyes to look up. So already, before we have gone anywhere at all, 3 different directions have been called above. The star over your roof, the northern face of the galaxy we drift above, the slow ceiling of the sky itself, and not one of them holds still. Each one is borrowed, each one is drifting, each one true only for tonight. That is the quiet problem we are going to sit inside together. Not whether there is something above you, there is, but what above could possibly mean once you follow it far enough that the ground you measured it from has slipped away beneath you too. None of this is anything you need to keep. You will not be tested on the numbers, and you are allowed to lose them the moment they pass through you. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding. Let the breath you are taking now be a little slower than the one before it. The star over your roof will keep pointing whether you follow it or not. But if you would like to follow it, all the way out, past the places where up and down still make sense and into the places where they stop, then stay here with me a while, and we will start to climb. The climb begins not with a distance, but with a decision. That is the first strange thing to sit with, here in the dark, before any of the big numbers arrive. The history of what lies above you is really the history of a single number, the number for how far up reaches, and that number has been quietly swelling for as long as there have been eyes to raise. Every few generations, someone pushes it outward, past the edge where everyone assumed it stopped. And the moment they do, the old number loses its size. It stops feeling enormous and starts feeling almost sweet, almost small, the way the first guess of a child feels once the true answer has walked into the room. For most of the time there have been people, up was a homely thing. It was the height of the tallest tree at the edge of the field. It was as far as a stone could be thrown, as high as a bird would climb before it became a speck. The roof of the sky pressed down overhead like a painted lid. You felt you could almost reach up and touch. The number for above was first measured in the length of a body, then in the height of a hill, then in the slow arc of a single star, because the earliest people who tried to measure the real sky did it with one star and one line drawn straight up through it. Their entire heaven turned on a single fixed nail, and everything else wheeled around it. That was the number. One star, one direction, and a lid you believed you could brush with your fingers. Then, across a handful of ordinary meeting days in the year 1958, a group of astronomers did something that sounds almost like a joke when you lay it out in plain words. They gathered, and they voted on where the top of the galaxy is. The International Astronomical Union, the body that holds the authority to name and define the things in the sky, agreed among themselves that the north of the Milky Way, its official up, would sit in a small and unremarkable constellation named Coma Berenices, which means Berenice's hair. They pinned it to an exact spot, 12 hours and 51 minutes of right ascension, a little more than 27 degrees north of the celestial equator. They wrote the coordinates down, and they made them binding, and from that day forward the entire galaxy had a top and a bottom. Not because anyone had travelled there, not because a probe had found a marker floating in the black, but because a room full of tired people had agreed to place them, and then broke for lunch. Rest on that for a moment, because it is easy to slide past how odd it is. There was no physical reason to choose that direction over any other. Nothing about that patch of sky is heavier, or brighter, or more like a summit than the patch on the far side. Up, for the whole Milky Way, was not discovered, it was declared. It is a line on a map that everyone agreed to honour, the same way a border on the ground is real, only because we have all decided to stop at it. This is the thing to carry gently with you as we climb. Every up we are going to find tonight was placed by a hand before it was ever measured by an instrument. None of this is anything you need to hold on to. Let it pass through you. Let your jaw loosen. The border in the sky will hold whether or not you remember where it is. For a while that was the whole state of the number. Up was a direction we had agreed to, and the deepest, truest thing anyone could say about it was a string of coordinates, a precise little address for a place no one could reach. It felt, for a time, like the question had mostly been settled, and then, on the 30th of September, in the year 1981, 4 astronomers pushed the number so far outward that those neat coordinates suddenly looked like a child's drawing of the sea. Their names were Robert Kirshner, Augustus Oemler, Paul Schechter, and Stephen Schechtman. They were not hunting for anything strange. They were doing patient, ordinary work, mapping the distances to galaxies in one wedge of sky, the wedge that lies in the direction of the northern constellation Boötis, the herdsman. When you look that way, you are looking almost straight out of the top of our galaxy, through the thinnest part of the dust, into the clearest deep water there is. They expected what everyone expected. A crowd. Galaxies scattered across the depth at the usual density. Thousands of them threaded through the volume they were surveying. The ordinary furniture of a universe that was supposed to look much the same everywhere you pointed. What they found instead was almost nothing. A gap. An enormous rounded absence in the map where the galaxies simply stopped. When they finished measuring it, the shape of the emptiness was staggering. It ran roughly 330 million light-years from one side to the other, and it sat about 700 million light years away from the room you are lying in. Inside a volume that should have held many thousands of galaxies, they could count only around 60. Not 60,000. 60. A space so vast and so bare that if you were born inside a galaxy at its center, you could live your whole life, and your children could live theirs, and the sky above you would stay an almost perfect black, with no bright neighbor anywhere close enough to notice. Let the size of that settle slowly, because the mind slides right off it if you rush. A light year is not a number your body knows, so hold it this way instead. The light that is showing us that emptiness tonight, the light our telescopes gather to prove the void is even there, left on its journey toward us around 700 million years ago, long before anything with a backbone had hauled itself out of the ocean and onto the land. It has been crossing that stillness the entire time, through all of it, every ice age and every ancestor, only to arrive here and tell us that where thousands of galaxies should be blazing, there is a hole. Robert Kirshner, writing later to a colleague, is said to have called it exactly that, plainly, without dressing it up in anything softer. A hole in the universe. You do not have to picture the whole of it. You could not, and neither can anyone alive. Just let the one true fact come to rest on you, that there is a place above us where almost nothing is, and then let even that go loose. This is the number swelling again, right here on one September evening. Not a direction we had voted for, not an address in Berenices' hair, a whole 330 million light years wide, sitting almost directly above the top of our galaxy, empty in a way the science of the time could not explain, and, if we are honest, still cannot fully explain tonight. It made the coordinates of 1958 feel like a doorway drawn on a wall. We had spent all our cleverness deciding where up was, and up, it turned out, opened onto a vacancy larger than anything we had a word for. And here is the thing that keeps the climb honest. The reason we are nowhere near finished. The reason this is only the opening of the numbers long story. Even that hole, as impossibly large as it is, was still something above us we could point at. It had edges. It had a location. It could be drawn on the map, even if all the map contained was absence. The next people to push the number out would not point up at all. They would not reach for a telescope or a distant constellation. They would reach down, into the rock beneath the very bed you are resting on, into the crushed and patient record of everything that has ever lived and died on this world. Because the next time the number grew, it did not come to us out of the sky. It came up out of the graveyard of the Earth itself. In the year 1984, two people went looking for a rhythm inside extinction. Their names were David Raup and Jack Sepkoski, and they were paleontologists, which means they spent their lives reading the thin bright bands of the fossil record the way you might read the rings of a tree. They gathered up the deaths of the sea, every family of marine creatures that had ever risen and then vanished, every clam and coral and swimming thing that the rock had bothered to keep. They laid out across the long corridor of time. And when they stepped back and looked at the whole pattern together and published what they found that year in the journal Nature, they saw something that should not have been there. The great dyings were not random. They seemed to arrive on a schedule. Roughly once every 26 million years, the record thinned, the world emptied, and a large share of everything alive was quietly erased. Rest on that number for a moment the way you are resting now. 26 million years. Our whole species, every human who has ever drawn a single breath, is far younger than even one of those intervals. You could lay the entire history of humankind end to end, over and over, and still not begin to fill one of the gaps between those dyings. The clock that Raup and Sepkoski found does not tick for us. It ticks for the Earth, and the truly unsettling part was not that death seemed to have a rhythm. The unsettling part was that nothing on the Earth itself seemed slow enough, or steady enough, or patient enough to be the thing keeping the beat. So a few people began to wonder whether the beat was not coming from the Earth at all, whether it was coming instead from the sky, and more precisely, from the slow rise and fall of our own sun. You already know that the Sun does not simply circle the center of the galaxy on a flat, tidy track. It bobs. It rides up through the crowded plane of the Milky Way, and then sinks back down through it and rises again, like a cork lifting and settling on a very slow swell, once every 64 million years or so, drifting as far as 500 light-years above the middle of the disk before gravity reaches up and draws it home. Two researchers in particular, William Napier and Victor Klube, suggested that these crossings might be the hidden hand behind the dying. When the Sun plows through the dense heart of the galactic plane, they reasoned, the gravity of all that gathered gas and dust could reach out to the vast cloud of frozen comets that surrounds our solar system, and loosen a few of them, and send them falling inward toward the warm inner worlds, a rain of ice and stone, arriving once every long age, timed not by anything here at all, but by our slow address in the galaxy. It is a beautiful idea, and you should hold it loosely, because the numbers have never quite agreed. The rhythm of the crossings and the rhythm of the dying do not line up as cleanly as anyone would like, and to this day the link stays contested, unproven, a maybe rather than a fact. Let it be a maybe. You do not need to settle it tonight. But notice what it did to the size of the story. For one strange moment, the death of a small creature buried in the rock hundreds of millions of years ago, and the position of the Sun above an invisible plane you cannot point to, became the very same sentence. The graveyard below you and the sky above you were suddenly reaching for each other, and still the number was not finished growing, because while some were listening to the fossil record for the pulse of the galaxy, others had turned the question inside out entirely. They stopped asking where things are. They started asking where things are going. In the year 2014, a group of astronomers led by a man named R. Brent Tully at the University of Hawaii did something no one had quite done before. Instead of mapping the galaxies around us by their positions, like pins pressed into a wall, they mapped them by their motion, by the direction each one is quietly drifting through space. And when they drew the flow, when they traced every current of every galaxy across our enormous neighborhood, a shape rose up out of the dark that no one had ever seen whole. They called it Laniatea. It is a Hawaiian word, and it means immeasurable heaven, and it was chosen deliberately, because the thing they had found strains the ordinary meaning of the word large. Laniatea is a supercluster, a single connected structure 520 million light-years across, holding at least 100,000 galaxies, and our entire Milky Way is only one faint thread near its outer edge. Every one of those 100,000 galaxies, our own included, is sliding slowly inward along the same great current, toward a common low place at the bottom of the basin. Let that settle over you gently. We are not simply sitting in the universe. We are draining through it, all of us together, toward a floor we cannot yet see. You could be forgiven for thinking that would be the end of it. A structure more than 500 million light-years wide ought to be the largest thing anyone ever needs to name. And here the story does something almost unkind. In July of the year 2020, two astronomers, Daniel Pomerade of Paris-Saclay University in France, and that same R. Brent Tully in Hawaii, announced that they had found something larger still, and that it had been hanging over the southern sky the entire time, unseen. They named it the South Pole Wall. It is a filament, a vast wall built from hundreds of thousands of galaxies, and it stretches 1.37 billion light-years from end to end, close to 1.5 billion, curving near the pole at the very bottom of our sky. Sit for a moment with how strange that is. A structure more than 1 billion light-years long, one of the largest things ever charted by human beings, and until only a handful of years ago, no one knew it was there. It had been hiding in the one place we are worst at looking, behind the crowded band of our own galaxy, where the dust and the massed stars of the Milky Way smear across our view and blot out everything beyond. Its nearest edge lies roughly 500 million light-years away, and even now large stretches of it remain lost in that glare, mapped only by inference, a wall whose shape we can feel more than we can truly see. Every single time we believed we had reached the top of the number had simply been waiting there, patient, behind the dust. And when the astronomers followed the flow further out, past Laniakea, past the low floor we are all draining toward, they found that even that was not the bottom of anything. The whole of Laniakea, all 100,000 of its galaxies, is itself sliding towards something farther away and heavier still, a distant gathering of mass called the Shapley Supercluster, some 650 million light-years off in the dark. The thing that pulls us is itself being pulled. The floor has a floor beneath it, and below that one, almost certainly, another we have not yet learned how to measure. Let your shoulders soften now, because there is truly nothing here to hold on to. In the span of a single human lifetime, in the short years between Rope and Sepkoski reading Death in the Rock, and two men in France and Hawaii drawing a wall across the southern sky, the number that answers what lies above and below us climbed from the height of a tree to the reach of a comet to 520 million light-years to nearly 1.5 billion, and then quietly admitted that it was still not done. And so this is the crushing thing the climb keeps arriving at, softly again and again. There is no ceiling to the sky and no floor to the ground, only larger and larger things falling toward larger and larger things, forever, with us somewhere loose in the middle of it all. But there is one motion inside all of that endless falling that is close enough to reach you. Not the supercluster, not the wall a billion light-years long, something far smaller and far nearer, a slow rise and a slow fall that you are riding at this very moment, without feeling the faintest thing. You already know where you are tonight, 55 light-years above the middle of the galaxy, in the thin, bright northern half of the disk, drifting a little higher with every year that passes. What you have not been told yet is that you do not stay up here. The height you are sitting at is not an address. It is a moment in a much longer motion, and the motion carries you down. The sun does not hold its place above the galaxy. It behaves, the way the astronomers describe it, like a cork resting on the surface of moving water. It rises above the crowded middle of the Milky Way, slows, comes to the top of its climb, and then begins the long fall back down through that middle, sinking past the center line and out the far side, until gravity gathers it and lifts it once more. Up, and through, and down, and through again. One full bob, one complete rise and one complete fall, takes something close to 64 million years. At the very top of each swing, the sun climbs as far as 500 light-years above the plane before it can go no higher, and then, gently, it starts to sink. And that is only the smaller of the two motions you are riding. All the while it bobs, the sun is also traveling in a wide circle around the heart of the galaxy, at a distance of about 26,000 light-years from the center, roughly halfway out, not in the bright core, not at the lonely edge, but somewhere in the calm middle country of the disk. It travels that circle at 30.4 kilometers every second, which is to say more than 100,000 kilometers in a single hour, faster than any machine our hands have ever made. And yet the circle is so unimaginably vast that one full loop around the galactic center takes somewhere between 225 and 250 million years. A single one of those loops is called a galactic year. In all the time since the sun first caught fire, it has completed only about 20 of them. You are 20 galactic years old as a solar system, and in every one of those long years, you rose and fell through the plane again and again, like breathing. Now here is the part that has kept a certain kind of scientist lying awake. The middle of the galaxy, the plane the sun keeps sinking through, is not empty. It is the crowded floor of the disk, where the gas lies thickest, where the dust gathers into dark lanes, where other stars run closer together than they do out in the quiet heights. And that floor is not even level. The disk of the Milky Way is warped as far as we can tell, curving upward on one side and downward on the other, so that even the surface we fall through is not a clean flat thing, but something with a slow bend in it. When the sun drops down through that crowded tilted floor, twice in every one of its long bobs. It moves for a while through denser country than it knows up here in the calm northern quiet where you are sitting tonight. In 1984, two people who had never studied the sky at all published a short paper in the journal Nature. Their names were David Raup and Jack Sepkoski, and they were paleontologists. They read the ocean, or rather, they read what the ocean leaves behind, the enormous catalogue of small sea creatures that lived and then vanished and pressed their shells into stone. And when they laid all of those disappearances out along the whole length of time, they thought they could see a rhythm hidden in them, not scattered, not random, a faint, regular pulse. Roughly every 26 million years, the paper suggested, the life in the seas suffered a dieback, a wave of extinction arriving very nearly on a schedule, as though something somewhere were keeping time. A clock is a frightening thing to find inside the fossil record, because a clock asks for a cause, something outside the ordinary churn of the living world, something patient and enormous, keeping that time from far away. And a few researchers, among them William Napier and Victor Klube, reached upward for the cause. What if the rhythm in the rock, they asked, was the rhythm of our own passage through the galaxy? What if each time the sun dropped down through that crowded plane, the combined gravity of all that gathered matter reached out to the very edge of our solar system, out to the vast, faint shell of frozen comets that is thought to hang around the sun far beyond the planets, and gave it the smallest nudge? And a nudge, they reasoned, would be enough. Loosen those distant sleeping comets even slightly, and a handful of them begin the long fall inward, toward the warmth, toward the light, toward us. It is a haunting idea, and it may simply not be true. The link has never been settled. It remains, in the careful and honest language of the people who study these things, contested. The numbers do not line up as cleanly as the story would like them to. The sun passes through the plane more often than once in 26 million years, and the fossil pulse itself is argued over, defended by some and quietly doubted by others. So hold this loosely, the way you would hold anything half glimpsed in the dark. It is not a fact you need to carry out of tonight. It is a possibility that has drifted at the edge of the science for decades now, neither proven nor entirely dismissed. The way a shape in the corner of an unlit room can be neither clearly seen nor fully explained away. But let yourself feel, just for a breath, what the idea is actually describing, because it may be the first thing in this whole long climb that could ever reach down and touch a body like the one lying still right now. Not a distance too large to picture, not a wall stretched across the southern sky. Something as intimate and as ordinary as a change in the colour of the morning. A single comet, loosened from the cold and the dark by the weight of the galaxy passing slowly beneath it, falling for 100,000 years toward a bright inner solar system it has never once seen, and arriving, on some perfectly ordinary morning, in the air above a world that is full of small, breathing, unsuspecting things. That is the whole of what the story proposes, that the slow music of where we sit inside the galaxy, this gentle rise and fall that your body cannot feel and has never felt, might, once in a very great while, lean down and rearrange everything that lives. There is a kind of vertigo in that, in learning that the softest, largest, most invisible motion imaginable, a cork bobbing on a wave over 64 million years, could ever end in something as sharp and final as the emptying of the seas. We tend to think the great dangers are the loud ones, the sudden ones, the ones that announce themselves, but the danger in this idea does not announce itself at all. It is silent, it is patient, it is already happening, has been happening the entire time, folded invisibly into the calm you are lying inside of. You are falling through the galaxy as you listen to this. You have been falling the whole of your life, and your parents' lives, and the lives of everyone who ever looked up, and not one of us has ever felt the floor of the disk approaching. And yet notice, before any of this can quicken your pulse, how far away it truly is, even at its most frightening. 26 million years is not a length of time a body was ever built to hold. It is not a span you will cross, or come anywhere near crossing. Whole lineages of creatures rise and flower and disappear inside a single one of those intervals, and never know the interval is passing. Your entire life, every year you will be given, every face you will ever love, every ordinary evening exactly like this one, fits inside a sliver of that time so impossibly thin that it would not register as a single tick of that enormous slow clock. Whatever the galaxy is doing to us, it is doing it far, far too gently and far too slowly for any one night to matter. The next crossing, if the crossings do anything at all, is nothing that you will ever have to meet. So let the number go. Let 26 million years pass through you the way the darkness passes through the window above you, touching nothing, taking nothing, asking nothing of you at all. You do not have to keep it. You do not have to keep any of it. The comets are asleep tonight, out at the edge of everything, exactly where they have always been. The plane is nowhere near. The cork rises and falls on its wave, and you rise and fall with it, held inside a motion so vast and so slow that from the inside it feels, forever and completely, like perfect stillness. And that stillness is the strange gift buried in all of it, the thing worth carrying down into sleep, that the largest motions of all are the ones you are most safely allowed to rest inside of. But the rock keeps a longer memory than any body, and the diebacks it recorded were real, whatever their cause. So before we let this rhythm settle all the way into silence, there is one more thing to follow down. One more turn of the same slow wheel, and it climbs. There were two people who counted the dying, and neither of them was looking at the sky. Their names were David Raup and Jack Sepkoski, and they were paleontologists, readers of stone, people who spent their working lives cataloguing the small hard remains of creatures that lived and vanished in the shallow seas of a much older Earth. In the year 1984, they published what they had found in the journal Nature, and what they had found was a rhythm. When they laid the great extinctions of ocean life out along the length of time, the moments when whole families of things simply stopped appearing in the rock, the losses did not fall at random. They seemed to come in a slow, repeating beat, one wave of dying roughly every 26 million years. A pulse, a metronome buried in the fossil record, ticking on a scale no living thing could ever feel. Sit with that number for a moment, because it is not a number a body was built to hold. 26 million years. If you tried to count it out 1 year at a time, one number a second, without sleeping, without stopping, you would die tens of thousands of times over before you reached the end. It is longer than there have been human beings. It is longer than there have been apes. And yet against the age of the Earth it is only a heartbeat, one of nearly 200 such beats since the planet cooled. Raup and Sepkoski had not found a catastrophe. They had found a clock. And here is where the two stories, the one you are lying inside of, and the one written in the stone, reach toward each other. Because you already know a rhythm of roughly the right size. You met it a few minutes ago. The sun does not simply circle the galaxy in a flat, calm ring. It bobs, gently above and below the crowded midplane of the disk, up through the thinning stars and back down into the thick of them, on a cycle that takes something near 64 million years from one crossing to the next, and passes through the dense middle roughly twice in that time. Two men reading dead shells, and a star rocking on its long, slow wave, keeping something like the same beat. It was too tempting a coincidence for some to leave alone. Astronomers, among them William Napier and Victor Klube, proposed a bridge between the two. The idea runs like this: far out beyond the planets, far beyond anything the sun's warmth can reach, our star is wrapped in a faint and enormous shell of frozen comets, trillions of them, drifting so slowly and so far away that they take millions of years to complete a single loop. This shell is loosely held. It is the very edge of the sun's grip, the place where its gravity fades almost to nothing. And when the sun sinks down through the dense plane of the galaxy, through the thicker clouds of gas, and the closer crowd of other stars, the gentle pull of all that passing matter could reach in and stir the shell. Not violently, not all at once, just enough. A small tug on a comet that has been asleep for 100 million years, enough to loosen it from its slow orbit and start it falling, inward, sunward, toward the small warm center where the planets are, toward, if the aim of blind chance is cruel enough, us. Feel how quiet the violence is at its beginning. There is no alarm. Somewhere out at the frozen fringe of the solar system, a mountain of ice the width of a city shifts by the smallest amount, nudged by the distant weight of stars it will never come near, and begins the longest fall there is. It would take that comet ages to arrive. Whole species would live and die and never know it was coming. And this, the story went, might be the hidden hand behind the beat in the rock. Every time the sun crossed the crowded plane, the shell was shaken, and some millions of years later the comets arrived, and the seas emptied, and the paleontologists, working across a gulf of time so vast it flattens all of this into a single line on a page, read the aftermath as a pulse. You should know, before you carry this any further towards sleep, that this bridge is contested and gently held. Many scientists look at the same fossil record and do not see so clean a clock at all. They see gaps in the data, uneven collecting, the ordinary raggedness of a history read from broken stone. The 26 million year beat may be real, or it may be a pattern the mind lays over noise the way it lays a face over the dark corners of a room. And even if the beat is real, the link to the galaxy's plane may be nothing more than two rhythms that happen, by pure accident, to be roughly the same length. The rock remembers that the diebacks happened. It does not say why. That honest uncertainty is not a flaw in the story. It is the story. We are creatures who have only just learned to look up and notice that we are moving at all, standing at the very beginning of understanding our own address, and much of what we reach for with our fingertips in the dark. But let the possibility rest against your body for one moment, because it is worth feeling and then setting down. If any of it is true, then the great turnings of life on this planet, the clearing of the stage that let new creatures rise, the losses that made room for the small warm animals that eventually became you, may have been written not here, not by anything that happened on the Earth at all, but by the slow rocking of our star through a sea of other stars. The tide that lifted you into existence may have had its source 500 light years above your head, in the thin high place the sun climbs to before gravity turns it back. You would be, in the most literal way imaginable, a thing shaped by the shape of the sky. And still, tonight, the shell holds. Tonight the sun is far from the crowded plane, riding high and northward, drifting up and away, and the comets out at the edge are undisturbed, sleeping in the cold exactly as they have slept through every empire and every extinction, and every quiet, ordinary evening like this one. Nothing is falling toward you. Nothing is coming. The rhythm, if it is a rhythm, is measured in spans so long that the whole of the human story fits inside a single unfinished beat of it, and you will not live to see the next crossing, and neither will anyone you will ever love, and that is not a loss. That is a mercy. You are allowed to belong to the small warm middle of the cycle, the safe and gentle trough of it, and to rest there without watching the horizon. So let the clock in the stone keep its own slow time without you. Let it tick on in the dark far below the reach of your breathing. You do not have to hold the 26 million years. You do not have to hold the shell of comets or the plane or the fall. Let your shoulders come down. Let the long numbers grow soft and lose their edges. The wheel that carries you turns whether you attend to it or not, and it asks nothing, and it will carry you just the same into sleep. But it does turn, and now it lifts us up out of the disk entirely, up and out through the thinnest window in the sky, to look at what waits above. Up, then, but be careful what you mean by up. Not up toward the ceiling above your bed, not up toward the roof, or the cold night beyond the roof, or the few stars you would find if you stood in a field and tilted your head all the way back. Those kinds of up belong to the ground beneath you, and the ground has been turning quietly the whole time you have been lying here, and it will go on turning. That up is a local thing. It changes every hour. The up we are climbing toward now is a different up entirely. It is the direction that points straight out of the flat plate of the galaxy, the short way, perpendicular to the whole enormous disk of stars you are embedded inside, straight out through the thinnest part of it into the clear. You have to understand what you are looking through before you can understand what you would see. You live inside a disk, not resting on top of it, not hanging beneath it, but suspended in the middle layer of it, a single warm point somewhere in a plate of stars, roughly 100,000 light years from edge to edge, threaded through with dust and gas and the soot of dead suns. When you look along the plane of that disk, sideways, edge on, you are staring through the entire thickness of it, light year upon light year of crowded starlight and drifting dust, all of it stacked between your eye and the far side. And you cannot see through it. That pale band that arches across a dark summer sky, the milky road that sailors and shepherds once steered their whole lives by, that is simply the disk seen edge on. It is beautiful. And it is a wall. It stops your eyes cold, but there is one direction where the wall goes thin, straight up out of the plate. Not the long crowded length of the disk, but the shallow skin of it, the short crossing through only a thin veil of dust, and by nothing more than the accident of where our particular sun happens to float. That thin direction points toward a faint and forgettable patch of the northern sky, a scatter of dim stars gathered under the old name, Coma Berenices. There is nothing there to catch the eye, no bright beacon, no famous shape. If you looked with only your eyes, you would very likely pass over it and never know. And yet this dim little region is, by formal agreement, the top of the galaxy, the north pole of the whole Milky Way, the exact direction of up. I want you to sit with how that direction was decided, because it tells you something gentle and strange about all of this. Up was not discovered. Up was chosen. In the year 1958, a body of astronomers agreed to fix the direction of galactic north to a precise point in Coma Berenices, written down to the minute and the second, an address pinned into a table so that everyone would measure from the same place. There is no wind up there. There is no floor down below. There is no cosmic ceiling that this direction rises toward. It is up because a committee, patient and reasonable, wrote that it would be up. The universe did not vote. The universe does not lean. It simply is, in every direction at once, and we, being small and needing a way to speak, drew a line and called one end of it the top. So let us look out through that chosen top, and here is where the scale you have been holding begins, very softly to fall away from you. In the last little while you carried the sun's slow bobbing, its rise and fall above and below the midplane of the disk, 500 light years at the very furthest reach of the wander before gravity draws it home again. Hold that number one last moment, 500 light years, the whole height of our cork upon the wave. Now let it go, because through this window it is nothing. It is less than a hair laid against a horizon. If you could ride the clear column of sight straight up out of Coma Berenices, you would leave the disk behind almost at once. The dust would fall away beneath you. The last near stars would thin and vanish, and then, for a very long while, there would be almost nothing at all. Just the dark, and your own line of sight running on and on into it, unobstructed, patient, going somewhere. And then, far up that clear column, further than the mind wants to reach, the darkness would begin to answer. Not with a single star, not with a scatter of stars, with galaxies, whole galaxies, each one a wheel of suns beyond counting, gathering thicker and thicker the further out you look, until you arrive at a place where they are packed close together in the hundreds. This is the Coma Cluster. It sits within only a few degrees of that formal galactic north, almost directly above us in the invented up, and it is one of the richest gatherings of galaxies anywhere our instruments can reach. Not hundreds of stars, hundreds, and by some careful counts thousands, of entire galaxies, each of them a place that could hold a sky, a night, a listener like you. Now let me give you the distance, and then let me give it to you again in a way your body can hold, because the raw figure alone is just a smear of zeros and it will slide off you in the dark. The Coma Cluster lies about 350 million light years away. A light year is the distance that light crosses in a single year, and light is the fastest thing there is. Nothing in all of creation moves quicker, and still it takes a light year's worth of running just to cross one. 350 million of them lie stacked between your eye and that swarm of galaxies. Which means this: the light that will land on your closed eyelids tonight, the light that left that cluster and has been falling toward this room the entire way, set out 350 million years ago. It left before there was a single dinosaur anywhere on Earth. It left before the first flower had ever opened. It left when the land was low and green and strange, and no eye existed to look up at all. That light has been traveling toward you across an ocean of time, longer than the entire age of animals on land, and its only destination, after all of that, is the quiet dark behind your eyes as you drift. You do not have to do anything with that. That is the thing I most want you to hear. You are not being asked to comprehend 350 million years, or to feel the weight of 1,000 galaxies, or to keep any of it. It is far too large to hold, and it was never yours to carry. Let the number arrive, and let it pass through you like weather through an open window. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have crept. Let your jaw soften. The old light will keep falling whether you meet it or not, and it asks nothing of you, and it will still be arriving long after you have slipped under. You can simply lie here inside its long, gentle rain, and let it be enough that it is beautiful. Because here is the turn, and I will only set it before you softly, the way you set a stone at the edge of a still pool, and watch the ring widen. That column of clear sight does not stop at the Coma Cluster. The cluster is not the far wall of the window. It is only the first great thing you meet on the way up. Push your gaze further along that same line, past the packed galaxies, out beyond 350 million light years, and onward into the deeper dark above. And the sky begins to do something that no one who first looked was prepared for. Something that broke the models. Something that one of the astronomers who found it would describe, in a quiet letter to a colleague, as a hole in the universe. It waits up there right now, directly above the top of your ceiling, and the top of your city, and the top of the whole turning disk you ride inside. It has a name, and a size, and a date it was stumbled upon, and we are climbing toward it. But not yet. First you should understand why a thing so vast could hide so long, and why the people who found it were not looking for it at all. They were mapping, not searching. In the late 1970s and into the early 1980s, a small group of astronomers set themselves a patient, almost tedious task. They wanted to measure how far away galaxies were, not to find anything in particular, just to build a map, a true map, one with depth in it. And to measure the distance to a galaxy, you cannot simply look at it, because a faint smudge of light might be a small galaxy that sits close by, or an enormous galaxy that lies impossibly far away. Brightness alone will lie to you. So they used something steadier. They used the color of the light itself. Rest on this for a moment, because it is the quiet engine underneath everything you are about to hear. The universe is expanding. Every distant galaxy is drifting away from us, and the farther away it lies, the faster it recedes. As a galaxy moves away, the light it sends us gets gently stretched. Its color slides ever so slightly toward the red end of things, the way the sound of a passing train drops in pitch as it moves off into the dark. Astronomers call that stretch a redshift. Measure the redshift, and you have measured the speed. Measure the speed, and you have measured the distance. Galaxy by galaxy, one smudge of light at a time, a flat photograph of the sky slowly turns into something with real depth. Something you could travel into. Near things and middle things and impossibly far things, all sorted at last into their true places. That is what Robert Kirshner and Augustus Oehmler and Paul Schechter and Stephen Schechtman set out to do. 4 astronomers, patiently gathering the redshifts of galaxies in a patch of sky up toward the constellation Boötis, high in the northern reaches of the heavens. Night after night, galaxy after galaxy, filling in the map. And then the map went empty. Not a little empty, not a thinning at the edges. They kept measuring distances, and the near galaxies arrived at the expected rate, and the middle ones did too. And then, at a certain depth, the count simply fell away. Where there should have been galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, there was almost nothing. A great rounded absence, sitting in the data like a missing room in a house you thought you knew. They had not gone hunting for a hole. They had been drawing a map, and the map had a hole in it. And here is why a thing so enormous could hide from us for so long. An absence cannot be photographed. Point a camera up toward Boötis on a clear night, and the emptiness does not show, because the nearby galaxies are painted right over the top of it, scattered across the same patch of sky, hiding the vacancy behind them like curtains drawn across an empty room. Only depth reveals it. Only when you have measured how far away each of those galaxies truly sits can you see that behind the near ones, in the deep, there is a place where the galaxies simply stop. Until those 4 began sorting the sky by distance, no one had ever looked deep enough, in the right way, to notice that something was missing at all. It was announced in the autumn of that year, on September the 30th, 1981, a date that now sits quietly in the story of how we came to know our own surroundings. The absence lay roughly 700 million light-years away, straight up along that clear northern window, out past the Coma Cluster, and onward into the deeper dark above your ceiling. And it was vast. It measured something close to 330 million light-years across. Let that settle, because it does not want to fit inside a human head, and you do not need to force it. Light is the fastest thing there is. Nothing in all the universe outruns it, and light takes 330 million years just to cross this one empty place. If you could stand at one edge of it and send a single beam toward the far side, that beam would still be traveling when the first great forests were rising on a young Earth. The slow green forests that would one day become coal. It would still be crossing while whole ages of the planet came and went. One passage, one empty room, and it is older, wider, and emptier than nearly everything that has ever lived. And inside all of that, where the plain mathematics of an average universe says there ought to be something like 10,000 galaxies, each one a turning wheel of 100 billion suns, the astronomers could find only about 60. 60. In a space with room for 10,000, scatter those few galaxies evenly through the emptiness, and each one would sit so far from its nearest neighbour that, from a quiet world inside it, on some clear and windless night, a creature might look up and see almost nothing at all. No soft band of light across the sky, no neighbouring galaxies near enough to notice, only its own small scattering of local stars, and beyond them a darkness so complete that it would be easy to believe you were the only thing that had ever been. There are, as far as anyone can tell, places exactly like that. Skies that are honest about how empty the universe really is. Kirchner, reaching for words in a letter to a colleague, called it a hole in the universe, and the phrase has stayed, because nothing tidier has ever really taken its place. Not a cloud, not a shadow, a hole. A place where the great fabric of galaxies, which everywhere else drapes across space in sheets and threads and clusters, simply thins to almost nothing and leaves a rounded nothing behind. It should not have been there. That was the part the models could not swallow at first. In the picture astronomers carried in their minds, the universe was meant to be smooth. Zoom out far enough, they believed, and the galaxies would even out, like grains of sand spread flat across a wide table, roughly the same in every direction you cared to look. A void this large, this empty, this clean, did not belong in a smooth universe. It hinted that the deep architecture of everything was stranger and more clumped than anyone had allowed for, that the matter of the cosmos gathers itself into walls and threads and knots and leaves between them enormous chambers of almost perfect emptiness, and that we, up here, ride directly beneath one of the largest of those chambers we have ever found. You do not have to hold the size of it. Let it be too big. That is the right response, and the restful one. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have quietly crept toward your ears. None of this asks anything of you tonight. The void has hung there for billions of years, and it will hang there long after this sentence has faded, and it does not need you to understand it in order to go on being exactly what it is. You are allowed to let the number stay large and unmeasured. Let your breathing slow. Let the emptiness sit far above the ceiling without setting any of its weight on your chest, but carry one small thing with you before we begin to climb again, because it is going to matter more than it seems. When those 4 astronomers found the Boötes void, they found it by absence, by what was missing, by the galaxies that should have appeared on the map and simply never did. And that is your first gentle lesson in the strangest truth about everything above and below us. Some of the largest things in the universe cannot be seen at all. They give off no light of their own to catch. They can only be inferred, sensed from a distance, read in the quiet behavior of everything around them. So if the north above your ceiling holds a great and rounded emptiness, then turn the question over in the dark and consider its opposite. If we can find what is missing by counting the galaxies that fail to arrive, then what are we to make of the reverse? What happens when the galaxies are all present, all accounted for, every last one of them exactly where it should be, and yet every single one of them is leaning, drifting, falling, quietly and together in the very same direction, towards something enormous, towards something with a pull we can measure and a mass we can weigh, and a place in the sky we can point to, and yet a face we have never once been allowed to see. It has a name, though the name barely counts as one. Astronomers call it the Great Attractor, which is less a title than a quiet confession. It is the phrase you reach for when you can feel something pulling and you cannot say what the something is. You give it a plain description and you leave it there, in the dark, unexplained. And that, very nearly, is the whole story of it, because for the better part of half a century now, we have known that our galaxy, and the galaxies nearest to ours, and a whole vast crowd of galaxies far beyond them, are all in motion, not drifting apart in every direction, the way the expanding universe alone would have them go. Moving together, sliding, all of them at once, toward a single place low in the southern sky, in the direction of 2 constellations that most people have never once learnt to find. They are called Norma and Triangulum Australe. The Southern Triangle. A quiet patch of sky you would only ever see if you travelled far below the equator and turned your face toward the bottom of the world, and here is where the distances stop being kind. The pull comes from somewhere between 150 and 250 million light-years away. Rest on that for a moment, the way you would rest a heavy thing on a table before you try to lift it again. The light arriving from that direction tonight, the faint whisper of it, left on its journey before there were any human beings to receive it, before there were the first small mammals. It set out when the great reptiles still walked, and it has been falling toward you across the entire span of that immense time. And only now, tonight, in this room, does it finally reach the end of its road. That is how far away the thing is that is quietly moving your galaxy, and still we can measure its grip, still we can feel it. The early estimates gave it a mass that the mind simply refuses to hold, something on the order of 10,000 trillion times the mass of our own sun. Say that slowly to yourself, and notice how the words come apart in your mouth. 10,000 trillion suns, gathered into one region of the sky, pulling. You cannot picture it, and you are not meant to. Let the number pass through you without trying to catch it. It is enough to know only this: there is a weight out there, greater than anything you will ever have a name for, and it has taken hold of everything you have ever called home, and it is drawing it slowly in. Now, if this were an ordinary story, that would be the frightening part, and we would stop there. But it is not the frightening part. It is not even the strange part. The strange part is that we have never seen it. Not once. Not in all the years we have known it was there. Because the Great Attractor sits in the worst possible place in the sky for us to look. It lies just behind the flat, crowded plane of our own galaxy, behind the thickest band of the Milky Way's dust and stars, the region astronomers have named, with a kind of resigned honesty, the zone of avoidance. It is the part of the sky our telescopes learn to look away from, because there is simply too much of our own galaxy in the way. Imagine trying to see a distant streetlight through a bonfire. The near light drowns the far one. And so for years the Great Attractor was a thing we could feel and could not find, a pressure with no face, a hand on the small of the back in a dark room. We only began to make it out at all by looking in the kinds of light our eyes were never built for. In X-rays, in radio waves, in the deep infrared, the light of warmth rather than the light of seeing, which slips through dust the way ordinary starlight cannot. We had to change what we meant by looking, just to catch the outline of the thing that has been steering us the whole time. And here, in the dark, is where I want to hand you the thing that most people get wrong. Because when someone first hears all of this, they picture something very specific, and the picture is almost entirely mistaken. They imagine a drain. They imagine a single monstrous object, a cosmic mouth, a great magnet at the bottom of everything, reaching out one enormous arm and dragging us helplessly down toward it. It is a natural thing to imagine. It is also not what is happening. It is not a single object. That is the first correction, and it is a gentle one. The Great Attractor is not one thing you could ever fly to and land upon. It is a whole region, a distributed heaviness, a great concentration of galaxies and clusters of galaxies all crowded together, their gravity adding up across an unthinkable stretch of space. There is no shore there. There is no floor. There is only a place where the universe is denser than the average, and so it leans on everything nearby a little harder than the emptiness around it. You are not falling toward a wall. You are falling toward a crowd. But the second correction is the one worth staying awake for, if you can manage to stay awake at all, and it is stranger than the first by a wide margin. Because when scientists finally measured our galaxy's true motion with real care, and compared it against the faint, even glow of the earliest light in the universe, they found something they did not expect. They found that roughly half of the pull we feel is not a pull at all. Sit with that. Half of the great motion of our galaxy, half of that long slide toward the southern sky, is not something out ahead of us drawing us forward. It is something behind us, pushing. Not attraction, but repulsion. Not a hand pulling you in, but a hand at your back, pressing you away. On the far side of us from the Great Attractor, out in another direction of the sky, there is a great and yawning emptiness, a region so underpopulated by galaxies that it has earned its own flat and honest name. They call it the Local Void. And it is enormous. It begins astonishingly close, just 3.25 million light years from us, right at the ragged edge of our own small neighborhood of galaxies, and from there it opens out and out until it spans as much as 400 million light years of very nearly nothing. A hole beside our doorstep, and then beyond the hole, a deeper hole still. And an emptiness, it turns out, does not sit quietly. Everywhere else in the universe there is stuff, and the stuff has weight, and the weight pulls. But where there is nothing to pull you back. So an underdense region behaves, from where you stand, exactly as though it were shoving you away. Its emptiness is a kind of force. All around the Local Void, matter is being drawn toward the fuller, heavier regions of space, which means matter is quietly draining away from the void, and we are among the things being drained. We are being pressed out of the emptiness the way a swimmer is pushed gently off a wall, and when you add it up, that push, that gentle expulsion from the great nothing behind us, accounts for something close to half of everything. Half of our motion is the pull of the crowd ahead, and half of it is the push of the void behind. So consider, in the dark, what that quietly means. You had thought, a moment ago, that we were being drawn somewhere, that there was a destination, terrible and enormous, and that we were being reeled in toward it. But that is not the shape of it. We are not being reeled in. We are being squeezed through, pulled from the front and pressed from the back, like a single grain caught between a rising slope and a hollow, rolling in the only direction the landscape allows. The great motion of everything you know is not a fall toward a place. It is a passage between two features of a landscape you cannot see, one of them too full and one of them too empty, and neither of them, in the end, chosen by us at all. And even now, even having said all of that, I have not told you the strangest part, and I am going to let it stay just out of reach for a little while longer, the way you let a thought hover at the edge of sleep without quite finishing it. Because there is a question we have carefully not asked. We have said that the great attractor pulls us. We have measured its grip, and weighed its impossible weight, and watched 1,000 galaxies lean toward it in the southern dark. But no one, in all of this, has yet asked the obvious thing. The child's question. The one you ask when you are too tired to be sophisticated about it. What is pulling the great attractor? Because it is not still. It, too, is moving. The thing that moves us is itself being moved. The heaviness we cannot see is itself sliding towards something heavier. And when the astronomers finally turned to follow that thread, when they stopped asking what pulls the galaxies and started asking what pulls the thing that pulls the galaxies, they found that the great attractor is not the bottom of anything. It is not a destination, and it never was. It is only a center of something so much larger that it took a Hawaiian word to hold it, and a new way of seeing the sky entirely, just to draw its edges. They gave it a name only recently, in the year 2014. A team led by an astronomer named Brent Tully, working out of the University of Hawaii, sat down with a question that sounds childishly simple and turns out to be nearly bottomless. They wanted to know where the Milky Way actually belongs, not its address in the old sense, not its distance from this star or that cluster. They wanted to know which vast thing it is a part of, and to answer that, they did something quietly radical. They stopped asking where the galaxies are, and started asking where the galaxies are going. Think about what that changes. For most of the history of stargazing, we mapped the sky by position. This light here, that smudge there, so many degrees apart, so many years distant. We drew the universe the way you might pin photographs to a wall, but Tully and his colleagues drew it a different way. They measured the motion of tens of thousands of galaxies, the slow drift of each one through space, and they asked a single question of every point of light. Which way is it flowing? And when you connect all those flows, when you trace every galaxy along the current it is riding, something appears that no photograph could ever show you. Not a picture of where things are, a map of where everything is being carried. What emerged from that map was a shape, a single enormous basin of flow, every galaxy inside it sliding gently down toward one low point, the way 100,000 streams on a hillside all eventually find the same valley floor. They named that whole basin Laniatea. It is a Hawaiian word, and it means, roughly, immeasurable heaven. And the name was not decoration. It was an honest confession of scale. Laniatea spans 520 million light-years. It holds at least 100,000 galaxies, and every single one of them, ours included, is defined as a member not by where it sits, but by where it falls. The Milky Way, it turned out, is not near the heart of this thing. We are out near the edge, on a thin outer tendril, one bright grain riding a current that runs inward toward the great attractor at the basin's floor. And here is where you have to let go of the picture your mind has already built, because the word attractor is doing a quiet violence to your understanding, and it is worth stopping to undo it. You have been imagining, I think, a drain, a whirlpool, some monstrous hidden mass with a mouth, sucking the galaxies down toward it, and one distant day the Milky Way arriving, swallowed, gone. Let that image dissolve. It is not what is happening. It has never been what is happening. The great attractor is not pulling us in the way water is pulled down a drain. It is the low point of a flow, and a flow is not a destination. We are not falling toward a thing that will one day catch us. Between us and that basin floor, space itself is stretching, the whole universe swelling outward, and that expansion works against the inward drift. We ride the current, yes, but the riverbed is lengthening beneath us as we go. In all likelihood, we will never arrive anywhere at all. The pull is real. The arrival is a fiction. What you are part of is not a plunge but a lean, a permanent unhurried leaning of 100,000 galaxies in one shared direction, and no floor waiting at the bottom to receive them. And there is a second thing the word attractor hides from you, gentler and stranger than the first. We are not only being pulled, we are also being pushed. Off to one side of us, in the direction we spoke of before, there sits that enormous nothing, the local void, that near-empty region beginning only 3.25 million light-years from our doorstep, and running out perhaps 400 million light-years into the dark. Emptiness, it turns out, has a kind of influence of its own, not because nothing reaches out with a hand, but because everywhere else has more. A void is a place with less matter than its surroundings, and matter is pulled toward matter, so a galaxy sitting on the edge of a great emptiness feels the rest of the crowded universe tugging it away from the hollow. The void does not push, the fullness around it pulls, but from where we sit, riding the seam between a vast emptiness on one side and heavy structure on the other, the effect feels exactly like a push at our back. Sit with the arithmetic of that for a moment, because it is quietly astonishing. When astronomers add up the total motion of our galaxy, our true drift through the wider universe, and try to account for where each part of that motion comes from, they find that roughly half of it is this. Half of our journey is not a falling toward. Half of it is a being pushed away. A slow flight from an emptiness that offers us nothing to hold on to. You are, at this very moment, lying still in a dark room, and also fleeing a hole in space you will never see, at a speed you cannot feel, for a reason that comes down to the simple fact that other places are heavier than the place beside you. There is nothing you need to do with that. You do not have to hold it. Let it move through you the way it moves through everything, and let your breathing stay slow. So the honest picture is not a whirlpool, and it is not a fall. It is a balance of a pull ahead and a pressure behind, a galaxy threading the narrow water between a valley and a void, carried by both at once. That was the real discovery hiding inside the friendly little word. Not a monster with a mouth, a landscape, a shape of flow across 520 million light-years, with us near its rim, leaning inward with everyone else. And you would think that would be the end of the thread. You found what pulls the galaxies. You found that the pull is half a push. You found the basin and named it immeasurable heaven, and drew its shivering edges. Surely now you have reached the floor of the question. Surely Laniatea, that 100,000 galaxy heaven, is the bottom. It is not. Because Laniatea, all 520 million light-years of it, every one of those 100,000 galaxies, the great attractor at its heart and the Milky Way out on its edge, the whole immeasurable heaven itself, is drifting. It is leaning. It is being carried, exactly as we are, towards something further out and heavier still. There is another concentration of mass out there in the dark, larger than the one at our own basin's floor, and it goes by the name of the Shapley Supercluster. It lies some 650 million light-years away, and toward it, slowly, patiently, the whole of Laniatea is falling, which means the great attractor, the thing that pulls the galaxies, the low point we spent so long chasing, is not resting at the bottom of anything either. It is on a slope of its own. The thing that moves us is being moved. The thing that moves us is being moved as well. And every time you climb one rung of that ladder, expecting at last to find something that simply sits, something still, something final, you find instead one more lean, one more current, one more heaviness sliding toward a heaviness beyond it. The floor keeps not being there, and you begin to wonder, softly, half asleep, whether there is a floor at all, or whether the leaning simply goes on, and on, all the way down. And yet, for all of that leaning, you feel nothing. That is the first strange kindness of it. You are being carried, right now, tonight, down a slope that has no bottom, and your body registers none of it. No wind, no tilt, no sense of the fall. The blanket over you does not slide toward the wall. The water in a glass beside your bed sits perfectly level. Everything you have ever called still is, in truth, in motion, and the motion is so smooth and so vast that stillness is simply the word your body reaches for when it cannot feel the speed. Because the speed is real. Our sun, carrying Earth, and this room, and you, and everything you have ever touched, is moving around the center of the galaxy at something close to 30 kilometers every second. Nearly 19 miles in the time it takes you to say the word second. Not once an hour, not once a minute. Every single second, another 19 miles of the dark slides quietly past, and has done, without pause, through every night you have ever slept, and every night anyone ever slept before you. And still, at that speed, one loop takes so long that the number stops behaving like a number. To go around once, a single circuit of the galactic center, takes somewhere between 225 and 250 million years. One lap. Astronomers call it a galactic year, and by that clock, everything you have ever read about in a history book, every empire, every war, every name ever carved into stone, all of it together would not fill even the first quiet hour of a single galactic morning. Let that settle for a moment. The last time our sun stood exactly where it stands tonight, one full turn of that great slow wheel ago, the world below was so unlike this one that you would not recognize a single living thing walking across it. And the sun simply kept turning, patient, indifferent, carrying whatever happened to be riding on its planets around one more time. You are riding it now. That is all tonight is, from the galaxy's point of view. One more small stretch of one more enormous year. There is nothing here you need to hold on to. Let the number be as large as it wants to be. It does not ask anything of you. You can feel your shoulders sink a little further into the bed, feel the honest weight of your own arms, and let 250 million years pass through you like a sound heard through a wall. Present, but nothing you have to answer. Now, folded inside that slow, enormous circling, there is a second, gentler motion, and this one we have already touched tonight. As the sun rides its long orbit, it does not stay flat. It rises and sinks through the plane of the galaxy, like a cork riding a slow swell on open water. Up through the crowded middle, out into the thinner space above, then back down, then through, then out the far side. One full rise and fall takes around 64 million years, and at the top of each climb, the sun lifts as much as 500 light-years above the crowded disk before gravity, quiet and unhurried, begins to draw it back down again. Right now, you are near the top of one of those rises. Climbing, already some 55 light-years above the middle of the galaxy, and still lifting, still drifting up and out of that crowded floor into the clearer, emptier space above it. You are, in the most literal sense the galaxy allows, going up. Slowly. On a swell that will not crest for a very long time. And here is where the everyday word begins to fail us, the way so many everyday words have failed us tonight. Because up sounds safe. Up sounds like rising out of danger, into open air, into the clear. But the crossing itself, the long passage back down through the crowded plane, the moment the cork slips under, has made some scientists uneasy for a long time. Not certain, not proven, just quietly uneasy. To understand why, you have to go back to the year 1984 and to two men who were not looking at the sky at all. They were looking at fossils. David Raup and Jack Sepkoski, paleontologists, had built one of the most patient catalogues anyone had ever assembled. A record of when whole families of sea creatures first appeared in the rock and when they vanished from it, reaching back hundreds of millions of years. And when they laid that record out across deep time and searched it for a rhythm in the dying, they believed they found one. The great extinctions, the mass disappearances, seemed to arrive not at random but on a beat. Roughly every 26 million years, the record thinned. Something, again and again, across an almost unthinkable span of time, seemed to reach down and clear the board. They published it in the journal Nature, and it unsettled people, because a clock like that needs a pendulum. Something has to be swinging on a 26 million year rhythm to keep such slow and terrible time. And a handful of researchers looked up at the sun's long bobbing motion through the galactic plane and wondered aloud whether the two rhythms might be one rhythm, whether every time the sun sank back down through the crowded disk, brushing past denser clouds of gas and dust and the massed gravity of the plane, that passage might reach out, far beyond the planets, to the great dim shell of frozen comets that hangs around our whole solar system, and nudge it. Just slightly. Just enough to send a slow rain of them falling inward, sunward, across the million years that followed, and enough, now and then, for one of them to find the Earth. I want to be careful with you here, in the dark, because this is a story that is easy to tell frighteningly and dishonest to tell as fact. The link is not settled. It has been argued over for 40 years, and it is contested still. The fossil rhythm itself is debated. The timing of our crossings does not line up cleanly with the extinctions. Many careful people think the whole connection is a coincidence dressed up as a cause, a pattern the human mind laid over noise, because the mind cannot help but look for the pendulum. So hold it loosely. Hold it the way you would hold any old story told late at night, the kind that might be true and might be nothing, and that you are under no obligation to decide. But feel, for just a moment, the shape of the idea, because the shape is the thing this whole night has been circling, that the rising and falling you cannot feel, the gentle bob of a cork you did not know you were riding, might be tied, across tens of millions of years, to the emptying of the world below. That up and down, the two smallest and most bodily words we have, the words a child learns before almost any other, might turn out to be the two hands of a very slow and very patient clock, and that we are, tonight, somewhere on its face. There is nothing to be done about any of it, and that is worth saying plainly, softly, so it can stop pulling at you. Even if every uneasy scientist were right, the next crossing lies further away than any worry you own could ever reach. It is not a thing that happens to a person. It is a thing that happens to the idea of a person, to the whole long chain of them, at intervals longer than our kind has yet existed. You will not be here. Nothing you love will be here. The number is so large that it loops all the way back around into a kind of peace. You can let it go. You can let it fall through you like all the others. And notice, as it falls, what has quietly happened to our simple words. We began tonight with up and down, as though they were the most solid things in the world, the floor beneath you and the ceiling above. And one by one, they have come loose. Up is only a committee's chosen direction. Down is only whichever way the heaviness happens to lean. Rising is not safety. Falling is not doom. And the two of them together may be nothing grander than the slow tick and tock of a galaxy breathing in and out across the whole long life of the Earth. But there is one more turn to this, and it is the strangest turn of all, because so far tonight, everything that has moved us by pulling. The heaviness at the bottom of the basin, the great attractor, the greater mass beyond it, all of it a matter of things reaching across the dark and drawing us gently in. the way anything with weight draws anything else. That is the half of the story you would expect. That is gravity behaving the way your body already understands it, the way a dropped cup already understands the floor. The other half almost no one expects. Because we are not only being pulled, we are also, at the very same time, being pushed. Off to one side of us, hidden for a long while behind the plane of our own galaxy, so that we could not properly see it at all, there is a region of space where there is very nearly nothing. Astronomers call it the local void, and it is not a small thing. It opens up just beyond the little family of galaxies we belong to, barely 3 million light-years from home, and from there, it yawns outward across as much as 400 million light-years of almost perfect emptiness. Almost no galaxies, almost no light, almost nothing at all, on a scale that quietly dwarfs so much of what we have named tonight. And emptiness, it turns out, has a kind of weight of its own, which is to say the lack of one. Everywhere around that void, the universe is a little fuller, a little heavier than the void itself. And so, ever so slowly, everything drifts away from the empty place and toward the fuller ones. The void does not reach out and shove us, it simply fails to hold us, while everything else pulls, and the result, measured against the oldest light there is that roughly half of our galaxy's entire motion is not us falling toward anything at all. It is us being quietly pressed away from the great nothing at our backs. Sit with that, gently, as you lie there. That half of everywhere we are going not because something ahead is calling to us, but because something behind us is empty. We are being pushed out of a hole, not drawn by the light, pressed by the dark. And if that is the empty place beside us, there is another one that lies, more or less above us, out in the direction we have spent all night calling galactic north, out past that clear thin window in the constellation of Coma Berenices. Out that way, some 700 million light-years off, there is a stretch of the universe so barren that when it was first stumbled upon in the year 1981 by astronomers simply counting galaxies in a survey and expecting the ordinary crowded sky, they very nearly could not believe the count. Across a region more than 300 million light-years wide enough to cradle many thousands of galaxies at the density the rest of the universe keeps, they found around 60. 60, where there should have been tens of thousands. One of them, writing to a colleague, called it a hole in the universe. A hole. Above us. Not a hole in the ground, not a hole a body could fall into, but a hole in the very fabric of where things are. A piece of the sky that simply forgot to fill itself with anything at all. And no one, even now, on this quiet night, all these years later, fully understands why it is there. And that hole is only what waits above you. Turn your attention the other way, down through the floor beneath the bed, down past the far side of the world and out the underside of the galaxy, and the sky there is not empty at all. It is heavy, somewhere off in the direction of two faint southern constellations, Norma and Triangulum Australe, hidden behind the crowded band of our own galaxy where the dust grows too thick for ordinary light to pass. There is a weight. For a long time no one could see it. They could only feel it, the way you feel a slope in the dark by the way everything rolls. Thousands upon thousands of galaxies, our own among them, were all found to be drifting, quietly and together, toward a single place none of them could quite make out. A place that came to be called, simply, the Great Attractor. Picture the mass of it. The early measurements reached for a number so large it stops behaving like a number at all. Something near 10,000 trillion times the mass of our Sun, gathered into one region of the sky. It sits perhaps 150 million light-years from where you are lying, perhaps 250, and every galaxy for a great distance around is leaning toward it. You are leaning toward it. This whole bed, this whole planet, the sun that will rise on it, all of it is sliding, gently and without any sensation whatsoever, toward that hidden weight in the south. And here is where it begins to fold in on itself. because you are not only being pulled, you are also being pushed, just off in another direction, starting close by, only 3.25 million light-years out, at the very edge of our small local family of galaxies. There is another emptiness, a great underdense region, a void that reaches outward as far as 400 million light-years, mostly hollow, mostly nothing. And nothing, it turns out, does something. Where there is less matter on one side of you, there is less to hold you there, and so you drift away from the emptiness as surely as you fall toward the weight. Astronomers who have measured our galaxy's true motion find that roughly half of it comes from this, from being quietly shoved by a vast region of almost nothing, pulled by the heavy dark in the south, pushed by the hollow dark to the side. You are held between an attraction you cannot see and a repulsion that is made of absence, and you feel neither of them, and you never will. Rest there for a moment. None of this asks anything of you. You do not have to hold the weight, or the emptiness, or the direction of the drift. Let your shoulders settle back into the mattress. Let the numbers move through you and out the other side. Now let the clock loosen too, because the strangeness does not only live in space, it lives in time, in a span so long that everything you have ever called history is a single held breath inside it. Remember that the sun does not travel in a flat line around the galaxy. It rides up and down through the disk as it goes, like a horse on a slow carousel, cresting above the crowded plane and sinking back down through it, up and down, on a cycle that takes something close to 64 million years to complete. Each time it passes through the thick of the disk, it moves through denser country, through more gas, more dust, more distant tugging mass, and far out at the cold edge of our own solar system, in the great shell of frozen comets that surrounds it, that passage may be felt as the faintest of disturbances, a nudge that sends a few of those icy bodies falling inward toward the light. In the year 1984, two scientists studying the fossil record, David Raup and Jack Sepkoski, noticed something in the long history of dying, the great extinctions of life on this world, the moments when the seas emptied and the record thinned, seemed to arrive with a rhythm, a beat repeating roughly every 26 million years across hundreds of millions of years of stone. Some who came after wondered aloud whether that rhythm might match the sun's own rising and falling through the galactic plane, whether the slow carousel overhead had, again and again, reached down and rearranged the living world below. It is not proven, it may not be true at all. The link is disputed, held loosely by the very people who study it. But lie with it for a moment anyway, gently, the way you would hold any old story that might be true. That the reason certain creatures are gone, the reason the world outside your window is shaped the way it is shaped, might be written not in the ground beneath it, but in the sky above it, in a direction we cannot point to, an emotion we cannot feel. This is the altitude the mind reaches and can barely breathe at. Above you, a hole where thousands of galaxies should be, and simply are not. Below you, a weight so heavy it steers the whole neighborhood through the dark. And beside it an emptiness pushing back with the strange pressure of having nothing in it. And running through all of it, quietly, a clock measured not in years or in lifetimes, but in the slow turning of the galaxy itself, counting off the ages in the oldest language there is, the language of things that lived and then did not. Set that clock down now. Let it keep ticking somewhere behind you, in a room you have already walked out of. There is nothing more you need to do with it tonight. It will keep its own time whether you attend to it or not, the way the galaxy keeps its own time, and you are allowed to simply let it go. Because there is one more motion I have been holding back from you, and it is the largest of them all. Not the turning of the axis over your head, not the slow bob of the sun above and below the disk, something wider than either, and quieter, and in its own soft way the most unsettling thing in this whole night sky. It is a falling, a long, patient falling, and you are inside it right now, and you cannot feel it, and it has been going on since long before there was anyone here to feel anything at all. You have already met the weight that does the pulling. You have felt, Out in the dark behind the band of the Milky Way, that hidden mass toward the south, the thing that steers our whole crowd of galaxies as if we were leaves resting on the surface of a slow river. For a long time, astronomers called it exactly that, in their private way. A great attractor, a place the motion pointed toward. They could not see it, they could only see us, and everything near us, all drifting the same direction, and they reasoned backward from the drift to the thing that must be causing it. It was a shape inferred entirely from motion, the way you might know a person had passed through a room only by the way the curtains were still settling. And here is where the story could have ended. Tidy and small. A hidden weight, a crowd of galaxies falling toward it. A name. But in the year 2014, a group of astronomers led by a man named Brent Tully, working at the University of Hawaii, did something that changed the size of the question entirely. They did not map the sky by where things are. They mapped it by where things are going. Picture that for a moment, gently, because it is a beautiful idea, and it is worth resting on. Every galaxy near us is moving. Each one carries a tiny velocity, a direction and a speed, laid quietly over the general expansion of the universe. On their own, these little motions look like nothing but noise, but Tully and his colleagues gathered thousands of them, and instead of asking where each galaxy sat, they asked which way each one was flowing. And when you draw those flows, when you let every galaxy become not a dot, but a small arrow, something appears that no map of mere positions had ever shown. The arrows organize. They stream, they pour, all of them, down invisible slopes toward invisible basins, exactly the way rain finds its way down a hillside into a valley you cannot see from where you are standing. They had drawn, for the first time, a watershed of the heavens, and a watershed has an edge. On a real hillside there is a line, a ridge, where the rain on one side runs down into one valley, and the rain on the other side runs into a different one entirely. Tully's team found that same kind of line drawn across the local universe, a boundary where the galaxies on our side flow inward toward our hidden weight, and the galaxies on the far side flow away toward some other basin altogether. And everything on our side of that line, everything that falls the way we fall, they gathered up and gave a single name. They called it a supercluster. They called it home. They called it emptier. It is a Hawaiian word, and it means immeasurable heaven. Sit with the size of the home they had found. Emptier spans 520 million light years, edge to edge. Inside it lie at least 100,000 galaxies, and each of those galaxies is itself a whole wheel of stars. And one of those 100,000, far out near the ragged edge, on a thin thread of the structure a long way from the center, is ours. Everything you have ever seen with your unaided eye, every star that has ever risen over you, every object in every telescope ever pointed in any direction, all of it, all of human seeing, sits inside one faint tendril of one supercluster. The supercluster has a name that means immeasurable heaven, and we are nowhere near the middle of it. We are near the shore, and for one moment, let that be a kind of comfort. It is so easy, lying here in the dark, to feel that all of this bigness is only cold, only indifferent, only a series of empty rooms getting larger and larger. But Tully's map is also, quietly, a homecoming. It says you have an address. It says the little house of the Milky Way stands in a real neighborhood with a real shape, a place you belong to whether you ever asked to or not, bound to 100,000 other houses by the oldest tie there is, the shared direction of a single fall. For most of human history we did not even know the Milky Way was a galaxy. Now we know its street, and its city, and the name of the whole country, and the country is called immeasurable heaven. Let your shoulders soften at that, if they will. You are not adrift in nothing. You are held, loosely, by a structure so large it took until this century for anyone to see it at all. But I promised you the dread would come gently, and it comes now, folded inside the very same map. Because that great weight at the bottom of our valley, the attractor that everything flows toward, is not the bottom. Laniatea has a center, yes, and we are falling toward it. But Laniatea itself is falling. The whole immeasurable heaven, all 520 million light-years of it, the 100,000 galaxies, our tendril and our shore and our small house on it, all of it is drifting, as one enormous body, towards something further still, toward an even greater concentration of mass, a supercluster more crowded than our own, lying roughly 650 million light-years away in the dark. They call it Shapley. So the thing we thought was the destination turns out to be only a way station. The bottom of the valley is not the bottom. It is a ledge on the side of a deeper valley, and our whole neighborhood, watershed and ridge and all, is sliding over that ledge toward a larger basin that we can barely map and do not truly understand. The falling you cannot feel is a falling within a falling. You are being carried toward a weight, and that weight is being carried toward a greater weight, and there is no reason yet discovered to believe that Shapley is the last of them. This is the pattern the deepest layer keeps showing us, and it is worth saying plainly, softly, so it can settle before we go on. Every time we find the edge of the map, the edge turns out to be the middle of a larger map. Every home turns out to sit inside a larger structure that is itself in motion towards something larger still. The compass we started with dissolved in our hands. The pole star turned out to be temporary. Our place above the galaxy turned out to be a slow bob on a wave. And now our whole supercluster, the immeasurable heaven itself, turns out to be one more thing that quietly falls. And even as Tully and his colleagues were drawing all of this, even as they were naming Laniatea and tracing its far shore, there were structures near us so large that they had not yet been found at all. Not distant, hidden ones. Enormous walls of galaxies lying almost against us, in cosmic terms obscured from every eye for the simplest and most human of reasons. They were behind something. They were behind our own galaxy, behind the thick bright band of dust and stars that we cannot see through, in the region the astronomers call, with quiet accuracy, the zone of avoidance. And in the summer of the year 2020, working once again alongside Brent Tully, an astronomer in France named Daniel Pomerade reached into that hidden band down near the southern pole of the sky and drew one of those walls out of the dark and measured it, and found that it stretched more than 1 billion light years from one end to the other. But that is the next layer down, and we are not there yet. For now, let this one rest gently on you, that we have a home, and its name means immeasurable heaven, and even it is falling. That the largest true thing we have ever mapped is not still, has never once been still, and is pouring, with us asleep inside it, toward a weight in the dark that we have only just begun to see. And now we go there. Down to that next layer, the one we set aside a moment ago, down past the far tendrils of Laniatea, down through the thin bright haze at the underside of our own galaxy, into the part of the southern sky that for almost the whole of human history was simply a closed door. The South Pole Wall. We named it a moment ago and let it drift past. Now we go inside it. What Daniel Pomerade in France and Brent Tully in Hawaii actually did was take the slow drifting motions of many thousands of galaxies, and from those motions alone, from nothing but the direction each faint smudge of light was quietly falling, they reconstructed a shape no telescope had ever shown them whole. And the shape was a wall. Not a wall of brick, not a wall of stone. A wall of galaxies, hundreds of thousands of them, hung together along a single vast curving sheet, arcing across the bottom of the sky and passing close by the southern pole of the heavens, the very point the Earth's axis would aim at if you stood at the bottom of the world and looked straight down through your own feet into space. They measured it from one end to the other, and it ran for 1.37 billion light years. Say that number slowly. More than 1 billion years of travel at the speed of light, just to cross a single structure once. The nearest edge of it rests about 500 million light years from the room you are lying in, and the light that finally let us trace that edge left it 500 million years ago, when there was nothing walking on the Earth at all, when every living thing on this whole planet was still soft and small and underwater, and the continents were bare and empty stone. That light has been crossing the dark toward us for the entire span of animal life, and it only reached us in time for us to notice, this very decade, that it had been carrying the outline of a wall the whole way. Here is the gentle part, and it is almost a kind of hope. For the whole of history, that wall was invisible to us, and not because it was too faint or too far. It was invisible because it was behind something. It sat in the zone of avoidance, tucked behind the glowing body of our own Milky Way, screened by the very stars we live among. We could not see through our own home to the thing that lay beyond it, and yet we found it anyway. Not by looking harder, but by listening to how everything falls. That is the quiet triumph folded inside all of this. We learn to map what we cannot see by watching the pull it leaves on the things we can. But rest, softly, on the other side of that. If a structure more than 1 billion light years across could hide behind our galaxy until only a handful of years ago, then how much more is still back there, still screened, still waiting in the one part of the sky we were never able to read? And there is a stranger thing pressed up against all of this, and it is not a wall, it is an absence. Just beyond the little cluster of galaxies we belong to, only about 3 million light years out, at the very fringe of our own neighborhood, a great emptiness begins. Astronomers call it the local void, and it is enormous, opening out across as much as 400 million light years of almost perfect nothing. And here is what it does to us. It pushes. An empty region holds less than its share of matter, and so it tugs on you less than the crowded regions on the far side. And the result, over the long ages, is that you drift away from the emptiness as surely as if it were pressing its hand against your back. Roughly half of our galaxy's whole motion through the universe, half the speed at which the entire Milky Way is sailing across the background of creation, comes not from being pulled toward anything at all, but from being pushed away from that void behind us, while the great clusters ahead reel us in from the front. We are pulled and pushed at the same time, squeezed, gently, between a fullness and an emptiness, and carried along, and none of it is anything you have ever felt or ever will. And the emptiness is not only beneath us. Remember the clear window we found looking the other way, up through the top of the galaxy, out toward the north. Out in that direction sits the loneliest place we know of, the Boots Void, a bubble of near total nothing some 330 million light years wide, holding barely 60 faint galaxies, where the ordinary reckoning says there should be many thousands. So look at the true shape of it now. Below us, the walls. Above us, the holes. Great sheets of galaxies threaded through the southern dark, and vast unexplained hollows opening in the north. This is the real texture of the thing you are drifting inside tonight. Not a smooth and even sprinkle of stars laid out like sand. A foam. Bright thin films of galaxies stretched around enormous empty rooms, and everything, the films and the rooms alike, slowly, patiently moving. And now the last thread, the one that pulls the others taut. We said that Laniatir, our home, immeasurable heaven, is falling. We said it paused toward that hidden weight, the great attractor, resting at its heart. But the great attractor is not the bottom of the slope. Further on, another 650 million light years deeper into that same stretch of southern sky, there is a greater gathering still, the Shapley Supercluster. More galaxies pooled more densely than anywhere else we have charted nearby. And Laniatir, all 100,000 galaxies of it, the great attractor included, is leaning toward Shapley. The thing that everything near us is falling toward is itself falling toward something larger. And there is no line written anywhere in the sky that promises Shapley is the end of it. Every single time we have found the bottom of the hill has turned out to keep going down, past the edge of whatever our instruments could reach. So this is where the final layer leaves us, and I want you to hold it lightly, the way you would hold a smooth stone you are too sleepy to keep carrying. Above and below, we have found walls, and we have found voids. We have found that our home has a name, and a direction, and a destiny, and that the direction is down, always down, toward weights behind weights behind weights. And you might think, drifting here, that if we could only climb high enough, pull ourselves back far enough, we would finally reach the top of the whole thing, the one place from which all of it resolves into a single clean picture, an up and a down that at last hold perfectly still. That is the very last thing we have left to look at together, because when you do pull back that far, further than the walls, further than the long fall toward Shapley, something happens to the whole idea of above and below that almost no one expects. But not yet. Not this breath. For now there is only the wall beneath you, and the void beyond it, and you, adrift and held, somewhere in the bright thin foam between. So pull back, let go of the ceiling above you, and the roof above that, and the thin shell of air, and the small blue world turning beneath your bed. Rise past the moon, past the sun, past the whole flat plate of the Milky Way with its warped and curling edges. Rise past the Coma Cluster and the great empty mouth of the Boite's void. Rise past the great attractor, past the long inward flow of Laniatea, past the far bright ridge of the South Pole Wall, past even Shapley, that weight 650 million light years off toward which everything else is quietly falling. Keep rising, until all of it, every wall and every void and every long river of galaxies, shrinks down beneath you into a single fine grain. And here is the thing almost no one expects. Here is what happens to above and below when you finally climb high enough to see the whole. They vanish. Not into some final ceiling. Not into a top. They vanish because there is nothing left to measure them against. At this scale, the scale of the whole visible cosmos, the structure smooths out. The walls thin into a haze. The voids fill in. The superclusters blur together like light seen through a fogged window. And what is left is not a landscape at all. It is a smoothness, a grey and even glow, the same in every direction you could ever choose to face. This is the strangest gift the universe keeps for the very end of the climb. Down close, where we live, everything is lumps and hollows and edges. There is a clear north and a hidden south. There is a hole above us and a wall below. There is a direction we are being pulled and a direction we are being pushed. But zoom out far enough, past every one of those features, and the lumpiness averages away. Spread the whole thing thin enough across enough distance, and the universe becomes the same everywhere. The same density, the same scatter of galaxies, the same faint light. Astronomers have a plain word for it. They say the universe, at the largest scales, is homogeneous, the same from place to place, and isotropic, the same in every direction you look. Rest on that for a moment, because it is a very quiet kind of astonishing. It means that every up and every down we have followed together tonight was a feature of the small, of the near, of the neighborhood, the invented north over the pole, the 55 light years we sit above the galaxy's midline, the Boite's emptiness above, and the great walls below. All of it real, every measurement true, every distance honest, and all of it local. All of it detail, sand grains in a dune that, seen from far enough away, is simply smooth. There is no top to the universe. There is no bottom. Not because we have not found them yet, but because the further out you go, the more the very idea of a top dissolves in your hands. You cannot stand above a thing that looks the same from every side. You cannot fall below a floor that is not there. At the scale of everything, above and below are not hidden. They are simply gone. And notice where that leaves you. Not nowhere. Somewhere very particular, in fact. Because the part of the universe you can see, the part whose light has had time to cross the emptiness and reach the small dark room where you are lying, that part has a center, and the center is you. Not you the person, not this bed, not this hemisphere. You the observer. Wherever you happen to be, the reachable universe spreads out around you as a sphere, and you sit at the middle of it, ringed on every side by a horizon of the oldest light there is. Move to another galaxy, and the horizon moves with you, and you are at the center again. Everyone is at the center of their own visible sphere, which is only another way of saying that no one is at the center of anything at all. There is no privileged seat, there is no true north, there is no floor to rest the whole thing on. There is only the middle of your own small circle of sight, and the smoothness beyond it, going on and on the same in every direction. You spent your whole waking life with a firm up over your head, and a firm down under your feet. Your body still believes in them, even now, even lying flat in the dark. The inner ear keeps its little count of which way is the ground. And that belief is not wrong, exactly. It is simply small. It is true for you, in this room, on this surface of this world. It was never true for the cosmos. The cosmos never had a preferred way to fall. We brought the up and the down with us, the way we bring them everywhere, because we are animals shaped by a planet that pulls, and we could not help but paint that pull across the whole sky. We looked out into a place with no direction and, needing one, we made one. A committee in 1958 drew a line to a faint patch of sky in Coma Berenices and called it north, and the line held, and it was useful, and it was, in the end, a decision. A kindness we did ourselves, a handrail bolted to a wall that was never there, and even our handrails drift. The star we call the pole star is only passing through the honour. In a little over 70 years, on the 24th of March in the year 2100, Polaris will slide as close to the true turning point of the sky as it will ever come. Closer than it has been in all of human history. And then, having reached its nearest approach, it will begin, very slowly, to pull away, and the sky will keep turning its long slow wheel, and by the year 12,000 it will be blue Vega that hangs near the top of the northern night, as it did once before, long before anyone alive was born to see it. Even up is on a schedule, even the fixed point moves. The one star we chose to steer by is a temporary appointment, held for a few thousand years, handed on. So here is where the whole long climb has brought us. We went looking for above and below, and we found them everywhere on the way up, real and measurable at every rung. And then, at the top of the ladder, we found that the ladder was leaning on nothing, that the top was not a top, that the universe we live inside does not, at its largest scale, know which way is up, and never did, and got along beautifully without knowing. All the direction, all the orientation, all the north and south and over and under, was ours. A frame we laid gently over a thing that has no frame of its own. And you might expect that to feel like a loss. A cold thing to carry down into sleep, the floor gone, the ceiling gone. No true up to reach for, no solid bottom to stand on, only smoothness in every direction, and yourself adrift at the center of a circle you can never leave. I want to sit here with you, in the dark, and tell you gently that it does not have to feel that way at all, because the same fact holds two shapes, and you get to choose which one you fall asleep inside. Perhaps it means you are lost, adrift with no compass, no anchor, no shore, a speck at the middle of a sphere of ancient light, being pushed by an emptiness and pulled toward a weight, with no floor beneath any of it. Perhaps that is the reading, and on some nights it will be the one that finds you. Or perhaps it means something quieter and kinder than that. Perhaps it means that you were never falling, because there was never a down to fall toward. Perhaps a universe with no true up and no true down is not a universe that has lost its floor, but one that never needed one that holds you evenly from every side at once. When there is no bottom, there is nothing to drop to. When every direction is the same, there is no wrong way to face. You are not clinging to the underside of anything, in danger of losing your grip. You are simply held, in the round, in the middle of your own soft horizon, by a cosmos too large and too even to have an edge for you to slip off. We began tonight with you afraid, in a small way, of the ceiling, of what was above it and what was below the bed, and how far down the down really went. And we followed the down as far as it goes. Weights behind weights behind weights. Attractor behind Laniakea behind Shapley. And we found no bottom to it. But we also found that the very idea of a bottom belongs to the small world, to the bedroom and the planet and the body, and not to the great smooth hole. Up there, where it all averages out, there is nothing under you and nothing over you. There is only the even, patient glow of everything, spread thin and equal across a sky with no top and no floor, and no wrong way to lie. So you can let the compass go now. All of it. Perhaps there is a flaw to the great fall after all, some final and enormous weight that even Shapley is quietly sliding toward. Some mass we have not yet learned to see behind the dust of our own galaxy. Or perhaps there is not. Perhaps the falling simply goes on, each thing leaning toward a larger thing forever, with no last stone resting at the bottom of the well. Perhaps the great emptiness above us, the quiet hole that Robert Kirshner once called a hole in the universe, is a flaw we will one day explain and fill in. Or perhaps it is simply how the fabric was cut, and there is nothing underneath it to find. Nobody lying awake tonight, on either side of the turning world, knows which of these is true. And that is allowed. You are not the one who has to know. That is the gift hidden inside it, the thing worth carrying down into sleep. You do not have to hold the map. You have spent your whole waking life keeping track of which way is up, steadying yourself against floors and ceilings and the long pull of the ground. And none of that careful work is needed here. Let it be someone else's turn. Let the astronomers with their slow patience keep watching the walls come out of the dust. Let them find the rest of that great southern wall that still hides behind our own bright band, the parts no one has mapped yet. Let Polaris drift toward its closest mark in the year 2100, and then slide away again, unhurried, across centuries you will never have to see. Let Vega wait its turn 10,000 years off. None of it asks a single thing of you tonight. You are permitted, for these last few minutes, to know nothing, and to steer nothing, and to simply be one small warm thing at rest inside a very large calm one. And think, one last time, how large. Not the room, not the planet, turning slow and steady beneath you in the dark, not even the galaxy. That flat warped wheel 100,000 light years across, with our small sun bobbing gently some 55 light years above its middle. Reach past all of it, out to where the walls and the voids and the superclusters begin to lose their edges, where Laniakea and its 100,000 galaxies shrink to a single bright fleck, in a froth that spreads evenly in every direction you could ever turn. At that size, the froth goes smooth. The lumps average away. There is no densest place and no emptiest place, no grandest wall and no deepest hole, only the same faint even glow wherever you lift your face. That is the scale at which above finally dissolves, not because anything destroyed it, because it was never truly there. And I want you to notice that this is not a lonely thought. It would be easy to hear all of this as something cold, to feel the smallness and mistake it for being lost. But you are not lost. A thing can only be lost when there is somewhere it was meant to be, and out here there is no meant to be. No true north stamped into the dark, no single corner you were supposed to reach and somehow missed. You are exactly where the whole even glow allows you to be, which is anywhere, which is here. The people who first traced these flows named the great smooth heaven around us Laniakea, immeasurable heaven. And they did not mean it as a warning. They meant it as an old and simple comfort. You are inside something far too vast to ever fall out of, and here, in the quiet, is where gravity of sleep leaves you each night, and where it will meet you again the next. Let the last of the numbers loosen their hold. Let your shoulders come down. Let the ceiling be only a ceiling again, and let that be enough. There is no up. There is no down. There is only this even glow everywhere, and you, for one more slow breath, held.